Well, hello, Saints fans. Hope you brought your hard hats and lunch pails like I told you to last video. Because, yeah, we really have to start having the conversation about rebuilding the Saints. Not only just the team, but organizationally, there's just, it is what it is, right? We're in the mess we're in, and it's a big mess. People dropping the comments like Northern, well, the priority should be this and that. Normally teams find themselves in a situation where they have a priority. We have so many problem issues. I don't know if you could, by definition, of priority, could we really narrow it down to one as the priority? Seems like they're all priorities. Um, so just running down the list, really wasn't going to go here, but unfortunately or fortunately, on the bit of news that hit the last couple of days since last time we kind of talked about the salary cap issue. One of them, the good news is I had never even thought about Ramchek taking a pay cut off his base salary for the retirement. So that created, we're just going to use round numbers because they're going to kind of get spread out all over the place, but basically 16 million in cap space. It's kind of get spread out a little bit. I'm under the assumption he's going to turn in his retirement papers June 2nd or after, sometime over the summer, which gives us the same effect as um, designating him as a June 1st cut. It just happens naturally because he's retiring after that date, which allows us to use our two cuts on designated cuts on two players. The other bit was a couple of days before that was Derek Carr just unceremoniously. It sounds like that Cat Terrell, but I heard this secondhand from Nick Underhill. Cat Terrell, not personally on his podcast, that Cat Terrell didn't ask about the salary. It was just kind of thrown out there by Carr when he's basically saying, yeah, no, I'm not taking a pay cut, which, my feeling on that, no pay cut, no job in New Orleans next year. Because we just can't guarantee him 40 million. We can't guarantee anybody 40 million, whether they're worth it or not. We just don't have the resources. And restructuring doesn't give us a pay cut. It just gives us relief in 2025, but we still have to deal with that cap hit and further down the road. And it is just at the point right now, it's better take your medicine now. As far as that, in negotiations, he who speaks first normally loses. He fired the shot about I'm not taking a pay cut. If I'm the Saints front office, fine. I'm not going to address it in the media. I'm not going to talk about it in a press conference. I'm not going to leak anything to any of the reporters around. I am just going to start. You got your first one in Ramchek with a pay cut. Just start going down the list, starting with the guys who are making guaranteed money already this year, where you can let's kick their cans down the road because that guaranteed money is probably fairly close to 40 million remaining outside of Carr. Maybe he might change his tune a little bit when you restructure, or in some cases, just out and out cuts is going to give you cap relief. All of a sudden, Ramchek's dropped that number to roughly 50 million ish just by doing what he did. That number starts getting near 30, less. Maybe Carr has a rethink. But at this point, if I'm the Saints and that happens, then I'm lowering. If you're not playing for 20 anymore, guaranteed 10 plus, maybe 18, maybe 16. Now, the last thing I'm going to say on this fair point, I'm not blaming Derek Carr for this. All he did was sign on the dotted line. I mean, the Saints gave him the deal. They gave him the money and, signed the contract, lived by the deal. We all know in the sports world, contracts mean almost nothing, about as much as the paper they're written on, because there's always this kind of stuff going on. But, at the same time, I get it. They offered it. They thought it was going to be the right move. They thought he was going to finish his career here. They thought this, they thought that. None of it came to fruition. And he's going, I still want my 40 million you told me I was going to get. And by the original contract, 4 years, 150 million, 100 million guaranteed. That extra 30 they're fighting over, well, that's the last 30 on that 100 guaranteed. So I have no sympathy for the Saints on this. I'm just taking the view of what you can and can't do, and what you can't do is pay him that guaranteed 40 million. The head coaching hire is equally as important. It is. Um, and finding the right one, easy to say, difficult to do. You know, sort of like when people say, well, you need to get a franchise quarterback. Well, no kidding, but very few guys that fit that bill. You need the right head coach. There's probably more of those for the Saints than there are franchise quarterbacks available, but not necessarily by much. And exactly this goes back to what the front office and management and ownership ultimately they should be calling the shots. She, Miss Benson, owns the team. Is you got to get everybody on the same page. Something I felt like the Saints haven't been anytime this decade, no matter who the coach and the GM and this, that, and the other thing was, I was involved in it. That synergy between the two has to come back. They've got to figure out. They've got to figure it out. I mean, there's just no getting around it. We can't have what's going on the last few years where it seems like, the popular conversation is it bad drafting or is it bad player development? And I kind of feel like it's both. It's somewhere in the middle. It's the fact that coaching staff can't develop, is too inflexible to move the scheme towards what the front office is getting them. The front office doesn't understand what they need. There's no, I don't know. I can't explain it. And when you're looking at how many good players leave here and go be really, really good for somebody else, you're like, we had him in the building and we had him in the building with a rookie contract. They should still be here, and they're not. One of the things that I'm slowly, I shouldn't say slowly warming up. I'm kind of okay with Aaron Glenn as long as we have the plan in place where we're going to succeed and give him a chance to succeed if indeed he is the head coach we hire, which I would think is the odds-on guy right now. But one of the things you talk about his leadership of men, I hear that phrase a lot. I see clips of him on the sideline, especially lately. Been seeing a lot of them since his name's so prevalent. Reminds me of him on the sideline coaching those vocal guys, not the stoic ones, not the ones like Belichick or Dennis Allen or whatever that just don't seem to, but like a Sean Payton, like a, I would kind of Bill Parcells-ish, but Parcells didn't nearly run around as much as Glenn does, but kind of being that vocal guy. And even Parcells is a bad example because I don't know if Parcells ever did it in the positive that we know of. He definitely would do it in the negative, but my point being with Glenn seems like both. Seeing clips where he's running over, he's getting in somebody's face because they needed a coach to get in their face, or running over after the big play and like he was when he was on the field playing excited for his players. And I think that goes a long way. But I think, and this is not my idea, this was pointed out in a couple different places on Twitter when I was the last couple of days, and kind of looking back on it, I got to kind of agree going, look at you want to talk about somebody to deal with injuries. I think somebody threw the number and I didn't fact check it, but somewhere around 12 of his top defensive players have been on IR at some point this season, including Alex Anzalone, who used to be in our building under a rookie deal. Obviously, Aiden Hutchinson, best player on his defense that he's lost for the year, and he keeps finding a way to run that defense. And he is creative. Watching some of the games, especially the game against Minnesota, Collinsworth, maybe whoever was announcing, brought up Aaron Glenn's name and said he's just really good at figuring out what he has available to get a scheme to work against the other team and hopefully shut him out, but at least keep him in the game because that offense is so good. Realizing as long as I'm not giving up 40, 35 a week, I'm holding it in the 20s. Our offense is generally that good. We're still in the game. That night, he happened to just totally shut down Minnesota and holding the 3 field goals. So kind of going, he may be the right guy, but whoever it is, that part that we're talking about, all the stuff that you need to do before you even start the season, the organizational skills needed. We have to find the right guy because of what we're about ready to go through. If you find the wrong guy, it's going to be that much harder to get through to the other side and get this organization turned around, to get the rebuild done. You find the right guy, and he might actually be able to keep you competitive while you're doing it, which would be a great thing because some of the guys you're having to put on your roster to get through this might all of a sudden, well, they might never be an NFL starter, but Detroit's proven, and we'll get to that in a minute. Sometimes you stumble across these guys and they stick on your team 3 or 4 years, and they're just one of your solid, dependable depth pieces. You don't think they're ever going to start many games for you and be productive, but they roll in a rotation, and you got quite a few of them on defense. They keep giving you meaningful snaps. They have the ability to make some plays. They can keep you in ball games when you have to lean on them and put them out there due to injury or something else. And just rolling in that thought to segue into fixing the defense. Defense has to be fixed. This is it. It's just has to be gutted. I don't know if you can get all that done in 2025. I don't think so. But I think you can get it done by 2026, be reasonable back to a competitive NFL defense. Because right now, what you're looking at that they can put on the field as of now, remember, it's not exactly we can go out in free agency right now and go get a big edge rusher or go get, and we're going to have a hard time keeping some of the players on our team that are free agents that we would probably like to bring back from being able to bring them back. It's got to be addressed. It's got to be addressed in the draft. The defensive line, again, and I know it's scary because we keep saying it's not that good. It needs to be rebuilt. It needs players. We keep trying to draft them and none of them work out. Again, front office, we'll get to that in a little while. But that problem's got to be addressed because you're going to have to go get some. They're going to have to show up and going to have to stop the run. And at least one has to be a pure terror pass rusher. Speed guy with the bend that everybody in the NFL is trying to get. Well, you've got to get one. You've got to have the guy that if they're going to offense is going to be taking 3-step drops and hitting dump offs, he can still get there and cause havoc with the quarterback. We need one. And on the books, we don't have one. Got to go find it. The linebacking core is just for various reasons not play after play after play. I think athletic enough in some areas to help you, and it gets exposed, especially in the passing game. Our best cover guy is DeMario. He's also the best pass rusher of the group. He's the best tackler of the group. He's a Hall of Famer. We don't know how much longer that skill set, and if you've paid attention this year, understand what I'm about ready to say because he's still a great linebacker, but he's still he's not even what he was last year, much less 2 years ago. Father Time's undefeated. It's eventually going to start wear and tearing on your body. He's had some injury issues. There's going to be some plays that he used to religiously make that he'll still make them occasionally, but he's not going to make them every single time that we need him to. And that's fine because he's still a great linebacker. I still think you need his leadership and everything on the field. The problem is we always had linebackers next to him. Pete Werner's one. Pete Werner is fantastic as a run stopper, especially moving forward. But he every year after year, he's getting more and more exposed when teams can isolate him in coverage. And he doesn't really help you as a pass rusher. Well, DeMario used to be able to cover those things. You can't count on DeMario covering for deficiencies in other players around him. You got to find some players that lessen or hopefully don't have those deficiencies. Let Mario just be Mario and not go, well, if they throw the ball, I got to worry about what Pete's doing with his guy or whatever he was doing 3, 4, 5 years ago. It worked. I just don't think it can work now. I think that's a big issue that they haven't acknowledged. Defensive back to safeties, we're in a lot of trouble there. Let's be honest. Enough said, corners, we're probably okay. You got Debo's a free agent. Lattimore's no longer here. I think you've got some good young guys to work with, but you got to work with them. You got to develop them. They're going to have to be ready to go in 2025. You're looking at rebuilding the offense. I don't know if that needs a rebuild so much, but it's hard to tell because we don't know if any part of that staff is coming back or if that's going to be the staff issues. And even going back to the defense and rebuilding the defense, maybe some scheme changes depending on who comes in, whether he's the head coach or an offensive head coach that brings in a. So you don't really know, but I know overall, as far as roster ability, the defense is in a lot of trouble. The offense got to get some guys healthy. It's a big if for us and a big problem. But you have some stuff to work with there. I think some guys we thought weren't going to be good played an awful lot, and at times they weren't. Times they were. I think you can add, maybe try to find some kind of some of those diamond in the roughs type draft picks, or maybe some of those free agents, sort of like we did with MVS. Getting a guy off the street that the rest of the NFL was like meh, and getting some value out of them. Probably gonna have to dip into that pool again. But overall, I mean, I think the offensive grade is incomplete because there's just so much going on there that makes it difficult to grade. But I think individually, when you're looking at the players that you had on the field, you see some stuff in some guys. Okay, others you see, well, they're dependable veterans, but we can't afford to pay that dependable veteran. But we've got to go find the younger, cheaper version of, say, like a Lucas Patrick, along those lines. On we got to get him cheap. I mean, it just, but at least hopefully get somewhere near that level of play. Hopefully we develop them, they get better, and that's the ultimate prize. If you could find maybe one or two, whether it's an offensive lineman, a tight end, a receiver, another running back, whatever, where you go, oh my God, we found the biggest example the Saints have is probably a Marcus Colston type 7th round. Oh my Lord, look at this guy. Bam. So they've got to go find him. But I think compared to the defensive side, where they really need those in the upgrades, and the offensive sides, it's upgrades here and there can kind of get you through next year. And again, if you can fix all the issues, front office, salary cap, get the right coaches in place, right schemes, because I'm sure that we're going to see at least a scheme change on the defensive side, I'm guessing, or an adjustment at least. All that mixes in. You're trying to work towards 2026, where you're still good with your draft picks. You haven't lost any draft capital. You have money to spend in free agency. You have the coach with the system, the process, the culture, everything in place. A leader of men who's ready to lead and try to pull this all together. And hopefully the front office just has their shit together and can be out in front of that, being the true leaders they need to be. Which brings me to number 5 in the rebuild. They need to find a Brad Holmes. Okay. I don't know if you know who Brad Holmes is. I didn't really know the name, but it's a question was asked to me is who's Detroit's GM, and I'm like, man, I don't really know. Looked it up, started looking into him, going, holy crap, we need to find this guy because he's 45 years old right now. Brad Holmes from 2003 to 2020 was a scout with the Rams back in the St. Louis days and in the LA. And in 2013, he was named director of college scouting. So basically, he was the head guy in charge in that scouting department there almost 20 years. Um, Research that I was coming up with was basically saying it was he gets a lot of the credit for the player development the Rams had during that time, but especially down that backstretch in the 20 teams. First round pick in Aaron Donald, first round in Jared Goff, first round in Todd Gurley. 3 great players. Donald, GOAT status there on the defensive interior. Goff's Goff. We see what he's doing. We saw what he did for a little bit with the Rams. They lost hope in him. Shows back up in Detroit, where Brad Holmes is taking over. He's got him where he's got him. Gurley, if without the knee issues similar to Ramczyk that forced him to retire early, he was a great running back and only knows how much of his career got short and how much more he'd have done. But then like Cooper Cup, who's third or fourth, I believe he's a third round pick at wide receiver. But you talk about a find there. I'm gonna throw one at you that and there was a rather large list of names like I kept finding with his influence kind of fingerprint on it, was Corey Littleton. He's probably a lot of people don't realize unless you played fantasy football with individual defensive players. Littleton was an undrafted linebacker that at the time I believe it was Wade Phillips, might have been their defensive coordinator. But regardless, they recognized, hey man, that guy's going to fit in this scheme really, really well and be really, really good, which he was. We ran into him a couple times, like around 2018. He's running around tackling everybody. He moves on from the Rams, knocked around a couple teams. I think Carolina even had him for a while, and we played against him again. But he just wasn't quite the same guy. He was still good, but he wasn't what he was fitting that scheme. So he comes from a background with the Rams of finding talented guys and being able to plug them in the first round like you're supposed to. Short list there. Finding guys day 2, day 3 of the draft, getting value out of them, and then coming out across like a Cooper Cup. Good Lord. And then undrafted, figuring out, got to add that guy because our DC has been looking for a guy like this and nobody drafted him. Just bring him in and give him a look. Oh, he's going to work out. That's the kind of thing the Saints need to be doing this year coming up. In 2021, Detroit, and I'll say this too, what I was reading, it kind of sounded like it wasn't like the Rams had Brad Holmes chained up in the basement of the Rams facility, trying to keep him hidden so nobody knows who he was. He had a name and reputation around the league, but for whatever reason, and I don't know. They didn't say. Maybe people did try to make a run at him during those years, and he didn't want to go anywhere. But eventually, in 2021, he left to become Detroit's GM. First move he made was trading Matthew Stafford back to his old boss, Les Snead, with the Rams to get Jared Goff and 2 first-round picks. Not bad first move, and the way it turned out. In 2021, they were 3-13. He got him his GM leadership. They went 3-13 to 9-8 to 12-5, including last year, 12-5, 2-1 in the playoffs, losing to the 49ers in the NFC Championship game. Right now, 15-2, number 1 seed, and we'll see how it shakes out. I didn't do a deep dive in his free agencies, but I did check his draft since he's been there in 2021. Yeah, it started off with Penei Sewell in the first round. Well, that was a good one. I'd forgotten about this one. I knew he was a 4th-round pick. Didn't realize it was Brad Holmes, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Another day 2, day 3 wide receiver that he finds that, he is a good one. If you haven't watched Detroit, watch him. 2022, Aiden Hutchinson, first round. And that kind of solved their pass rush issue right off the bat there. Then he goes in and gets Jameson Williams, who's turning into the number 2 opposite of St. Brown right now, just terrorizing people with his speed and ability. Another day 2 pick, Kirby Joseph, their starting free safety, who at one point was leading the league in interceptions. I don't know if he still is, but he was up there, and he's that type of guy. So you got a back-end playmaker back there, and free safety cleaning plays up and stealing the ball away. What more do you want? 23, we all know about Jahmyr Gibbs, and I still remember so many people laughing about that philosophy. Well, you really shouldn't take running backs in the first round. You definitely shouldn't take that guy. And I'm going, dear Lord, that is a first-round running back. Just 2 to 3 years, kind of in that stretch, watched him playing for Alabama. And like, he just reminds me of Alvin Kamara because he's the best running back and one of the best wide receivers Alabama had in their backfield. Lo and behold, Detroit's doing the same thing with him, and he makes plays. Losing Montgomery, everybody thought, oh, they lost their committee backfield. Yeah, no big deal. We'll just give it to Gibbs more. He's just going to accumulate more yardage and score more touchdowns. He's basically getting Montgomery's yardage and touchdowns anyway. No big hit there. Jack Campbell, first round, linebacker, who's kind of been a situational guy. And this goes back to Aaron Glenn. And, Campbell kind of reminds me a little bit of Pete Werner, but they don't leave him on the field as a 3-down guy. That's Anzalone. But Campbell's one of their top contributors. And nobody seems to have a problem with it. I guess when you go 15-2 and 12-5, using a first round pick as a kind of a situational guy, but that helps your defense be successful and helps you win. Nobody says boo about it. Just throwing it out there. Oh, yeah, Sam Laporta in the second round. Brian Branch, who, God, I wanted the Saints to draft so badly, in the second round. So that elite tight end everybody's looking for. He's got one in Laporta. Brian Branch, a defensive back that you could basically play anywhere. And again, he's a playmaker. He's a solid player. And if you don't keep your eye on him, what he's running around back there, he's going to make plays that can hurt you. This year, he drafted his first round pick was Terran Arnold, a cornerback. He drafted second round cornerback, but I didn't really go deep dive on this year because first 3 years he drafted were pretty good, and I am not counting guys like Pascal in Houston, who were day 2 and day 3 picks that he accumulated all over the place that are now crucial parts to what Detroit's doing on defense in those roles we're talking about. And actually, since Hutchinson went down, a couple of those edge rushers that they were pieces for the guys in the rotation. They've gotten them to step up, and I don't think they can replace Hutchinson, but it doesn't hurt as bad not having him there because some of these guys have stepped up their roles, have accepted the challenge, and are playing better. And quite frankly, that's something we couldn't get a lot of our guys to do when we were losing players due to injury. So the blueprint, to me, that's the way the whole thing breaks down, is fixing the front office. It doesn't look like they want to move on from anybody in the front office. Well, then you've got to go find a guy like this, hire him, lock him down, get him in there, strip some responsibility from some of those guys you don't want to fire, and let him start calling some shots. If nothing else, in the talent, call him vice president of talent relations. I don't care what you call him, because if you're not going to fire Jeff Ireland, but you can find a guy like this, and like I said, he was not a hidden secret in the NFL. So shame on the Saints organization if they don't know that these guys are floating around and who they are and not trying to go get one. So if you're not going to fire Jeff Ireland, find somebody like this to put over him in the department. If Jeff gets mad and wants to quit, so be it. If that's Mickey's purvey, that he's got too much influence in that he didn't want to give up, fine. Mickey, you're not in charge of scouting and drafting anymore. This guy is. Whatever it takes. That, the cap, and the coach are all up here. Once the coach gets in the building, fixing the defense, bringing in that staff, because I feel like we're going to be getting a whole new defensive staff one way or the other, and figuring out how it's going to work on offense. Do you have enough information? Do you want to keep the current staff? And how do you want to supplement the players that are coming back, hopefully healthy, with upgrades you need to make, knowing it's going to be really hard to make critical upgrades on that side of the ball under the current conditions we've set. So I don't want to say that this is a non-recoverable situation, because I've started, and I'm really probably going to need to trademark the embrace the suck, because I don't think you can get around that. I just keep looking at this going, maybe you can. A lot of things go your way this offseason where you can squeak by, and you're not looking at some type of 3-14 or 5-12 again, while you sort most of this out. But I keep feeling like if you address it now, if you start this rebuild literally now in all these areas and fixing as much as of that you can between now and the combine, and then realizing, okay, we've done what we can done there, making sure when March 14th, I believe, 4 p.m. is when the league opens, somewhere around there, you're fine with the league and you've got no cap issues. fully invested in going, we've got to go figure out how we're going to use these draft picks and bring as much of that young talent with the rookie deal. Hopefully some NFL ready guys, but this day and age, that's getting harder and harder to do coming out the college ranks. But as close as we can, and the ones that we can't, we've got to develop them. This is what we're looking for. This is the type of player we're looking for, attitude wise, cultural wise, that we're trying to rebuild. More importantly, this is the kind of player we're looking for football talent at the position they play. It sounds impossible. Actually, it kind of sounds two ways. It sounds really easy, but impossible to do. But I don't think it's definitely not easy, but I don't think it's impossible to do. I think you might have to take some lumps in the win-loss column. Take your medicine, so to speak, this year. But I really feel like if you do it right, and it's very doable if you want to work hard enough and you really want to implement the changes, ultimately what's going to happen, if you get 75% of it to work correct, you're 75% closer to 2026 of going, okay, legit. Now we've got something to build on. And the reason why I say this, and the reason why I'm talking about Brad Holmes, remember what we talked about. 2021, they were a 3-win team. They got to 9. They got to 12. They got to 15. Year 3, they got to the NFC Championship game. This year, they got to the number 1 seed in the first round bye. You want to think back to what Detroit was looking like before the 2021 offseason and think they were in a way better shape than we are right now? Well, we know that's not true. Probably pretty comparable to close, but we might actually be in better shape than they were. They bit the bullet. They started fixing what they needed to fix. They came out of it basically after a year, got to the other side, and there they are. Interested to see what's going to happen here. Now, sum it up this way: with like basically that was a 4-year plan for them, but they were back to winning seasons within 2. And the 3rd year they were building, 4th year they're building, and you just look at them and go, a lot like Frisco was when they hired Shanahan in Lynch in that same boat. Year 2, year 3, and then all of a sudden they're up until this year playoff team, right at the verge of making Super Bowls, right at the verge of almost winning one of them. And I'm looking at Detroit going, looks like they're following the same plan. I think it's a 3-year deal, but I think the more work you get done in year 1, Kosi, you're going to hit that 3-year, and by the 3rd year, going, we're for real. We're a playoff team. We're back where we want to be. This is what we want to do. The blueprint's out there. The Saints just have to have the courage organizationally. And again, starting from the ownership on down, is we're not going to keep telling ourselves we want to keep doing it the same way over and over. Have the courage, make the changes, make the leap, go get what you need to get to fix it. And if it miraculously works this offseason and you got 9, 10, 11 wins in 2025, so be it. Have it done by 2026. So thanks for joining, everyone. Really appreciate kicking in here. Don't really have much going on in the comments right now, so we will cut it a little short today. And as always, best way to support the channel is we'll plug the merchandise shop there. There's the link. Go ahead, take a look, see what we got. Thank you in advance for anything you buy, but that is the best way to help the channel. Also, please give me a thumbs up, like, share, subscribe, throw it down in the comments. This video is going to kind of set, I guess, mostly the outline that I'm looking at that we're probably going to be spending an awful lot of time talking about in the off season. Done a little bit on the salary cap. Till we see how things shake out. I may, like today, walk in with the intent of not really addressing it, but a couple of things happened. It was like, well, okay, let me bring that up. That is part of the 5-point plan, if you want to call it that. And the head coaching hire right now, the only interview that we've had, and I should have mentioned this earlier, is with Weaver, the defensive coordinator in Miami. I still don't know where that name came from, But the big guns we've requested interviews, and I think we've got most of the ones, but not sure. But I think there's more to talk about there once they actually interview for the job, and you kind of get the list of who's interviewed because every year you get the whole they requested an interview, a coach agrees to it, and then one side or the other backs out of it for some reason. So we're going to keep an eye on that. Hugely important. But I think at some point we'll have all the interviews in where they're looking to hire, plus what other teams have been doing in that time and have a clearer picture. But like I said earlier, I think Aaron Glenn's a front runner if he wants the job. This is probably the next thing we're going to touch on a little bit in the Sunday night live stream. A little bit about the rookies, a little bit about the players um, coming out. We still don't have the complete list yet of who's going to come out and who's going to return to college, but I think most people know about what it is. But with the ninth overall pick, kind of looking at those top 10 names, I've dug in there a little bit. And there's like, man, there's a couple in there I really think we should get. And I think there's a couple in there that it may not be a position of need, but if they would happen to fall all the way to 9, we'd have to think seriously hard about just going get the best player available because that's the best player available. So that'll be the focus Sunday night. We'll talk rookies a little bit. I don't think it's going to be too deep of a dive, and not only the top 10, but just kind of been going through a little bit by position what it's looking like throughout the draft. Mostly talking about what you might be able to pick up in the later rounds. So we'll have some discussions about that. So that'll be Sunday night, normal time around 8:30 ish Central Time. So till I see you then, I'm Tim. Peace out and who dat.